Good morning, everybody. Welcome. So we are going to be talking today about navigating the sales cycle. Hope you're doing well. If you are watching live on Facebook and you have questions throughout this process, drop them in the comment section. We'll be monitoring that. If you're live on the stream here and you have a question, you can either comment with it, or if you'd like, we can actually bring you on live. So we can send you a link. So just drop a comment and say, I have a question. We'll send you a link to jump on here with me, and you can actually ask your question live in person with your camera on. We can talk about it. So either way, if you want to put a comment in for questions, drop it in. If you want to come on stage with me here and talk, then we can do that too. So hope you're all doing really well. We are going to talk today about navigating the sales cycle. So I firmly believe that there are 8 steps in order to building a big business. All right. And so we're going to talk through each one of those 8 steps today. I believe real estate sales is a cycle that never ends. Right. So it's not like we go sell a house and then we never talk to that person again, and then we have to go find new business constantly. If we get the 8 steps here we're going to talk about really dialed in, you can build a massive business, a repeat referral business machine where people keep coming back to you. People keep referring you. People remember that they worked with you. Right. That's the biggest statistic that just blows my mind. That is something like 87% of people were satisfied with their realtor, but only a small percentage of people actually use their realtor again. And the reason they don't use their realtor again is because they forgot who they worked with. People move, keep in mind, people move on average now every 10 years. It's a decade, it's a long time. All right, so if we're not staying in touch with those people, they're probably not going to remember who they worked with. They're probably never going to refer us anybody because we haven't kept in touch with them. And the reason for that is it's on us, right? So we want to make sure we get through all of these 8 steps. So let's dive in. Here's my sales cycle. It's make calls. We know that real estate is a lead generation business. When you got into real estate, you may not know it, but you got into the lead generation business. So a lot of people look at our job as something fun. Oh, this would be fun. I like people. I like looking at pretty houses. We know that's a small fraction of the actual business. It's a small percentage of what we actually do. We are in the lead generation business. We need to be out there selling ourselves and letting people know that we are in the industry, so they choose to hire us to go buy homes and sell homes with us. Step 2 is conversations. We have to make sure we're having enough conversations and talking to enough people in order to build a big business. And I'm talking about a business, not a business where we just close like one deal and then a couple months later we close another one. And then a few months later we close another. If you want to really build a business where you consistently have closings, where you feel like you never have to worry about income again, even though we're a 100% commission-based business, you build such a strong business where you just know week after week after week you have closings coming in. And that's what I'm going to talk about through this process. So we have to be having conversations. Then we have to look at how is the appointment? How do we do on the actual appointment? Do we have a process in place or a presentation in place for our appointments, or are we just winging it? Have we been working with just family and friends, and so we didn't really have to have a good process in place? It was more like we knew they were going to work with us, so we didn't really have to oversell it. Here's the one mistake I think a lot of agents make. They go on an appointment with a family member and they don't do their presentation. Well, I got this. It's my aunt. She's going to list with me. All right, but maybe your aunt knows somebody else. And so like this mistake happens a lot. Do your presentation 100% of the time. We're going to talk about that on the appointment. The close, are we asking for the business at the end of our presentation? Are we doing what I used to do when I was new, where it was like, okay, let me know. Hope you pick me. Give me a call. All right. So are we actually asking questions at the close? And then how is our service throughout the process? How is the service we're giving people? Is it top tier service, or are they having to call us all the time with tons of questions because we're not constantly letting them know what the next steps in the process are? How do we do once the home's under contract? Are clients confused? Do they not know what's going on? Do they not know what they need to do next? All right, so Roberta says, I cannot hear you. Can anybody else having issues hearing me? Hopefully not, but drop a comment if you can hear me, please. It looks like everything's working well on my end from what I can tell. So pending, do we have a pending process? Do we have a closing process? And then are we getting a repeat and referral business? Roberta, it might be on your end. It looks like everyone's saying they can hear me. So maybe check your settings on your audio, maybe. Do we have a repeat and referral process where we're asking people to send us more business. So this is our cycle. Again, it's something that in my mind, it never stops. Once I have a client, I want that client to be my client for life. I want to give them such great service that they would never hesitate to refer family and friends and people they know to me. I want to build what we call raving fans, where people are like, oh my gosh, my realtor is the best. You have to use them. You have to use my realtor. They were fantastic. You're thinking about buying, you have to call my realtor. They were outstanding. That's the process or the level of service we want to give people, so we can build a really big business. So now let's dive in. We're going to talk about each step here. Let's talk about making calls. Lead generation. As I mentioned, lead generation, right? We're in the lead gen business. Who am I calling? All right, who am I calling? Do I have a plan in place every day to push my business forward and make calls? Or is it something where I'm just waiting and hoping that somebody will call me? When I got into real estate back in 2005, I started a company where we sat at the front desk and answered phones. There was no showing time or things like that back then. So agents would call into the office to schedule showings on listings. And so I would sit there and I would hope that somebody would call in off a sign and ask questions about a property. That was a hopeful strategy that didn't work so well. It was a very reactive strategy. It was not a proactive strategy. Once I turned my business around and saw that I need to go be lead generating every single day, talking to enough people to build my business, that's when my business started to really take off. So who am I calling? Do I have a database? Right? It blows my mind. So many agents don't keep a database. The database is like the lifeblood of your business. We know that 10% of the people in your database are moving every year. Do I have a database in place? If I have 300 people in my database, I have 30 transactions sitting there potentially every single year. All right, so I have to look at it and say, okay, if I do have a database and I have 300 people in there, or 1,000 or 5,000 or 100, whatever it is, how many deals am I pulling from there each year? And if it's not many, it's probably on us because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. What lead sources do I have to generate new business? I see so many agents go out and pay for leads and they don't even have their database in order yet. So what I would say is, before you look at buying the lead services out there, because the lead services work, everything works, right? Buying leads works if you work leads correctly. Zillow works, farming works, door knocking works, calling expireds works, FSBOs works, internet leads, all of it works if we have a process in place and we do it consistently. But what are my lead sources? But what I would say is, before I go start spending money, I would get my database really dialed in. How much time do I commit to lead generation every week? Am I consistently lead genning every single day, Monday through Friday? What I will tell you is that the adage, or the thing I was always taught, was 3 hours a day, which I agree with. If I can lead generate 3 hours a day, what I found in my experience, if I did 2 hours a day, it worked really well. An hour of outbound lead gen and an hour of follow-up a day. When I started consistently doing that, my business went to the roof. 1 hour of outbound lead gen, 1 hour of follow-up. 2 hours a day is very, very doable, in my opinion. And I would hit Saturdays as well. So it was 6 days a week. Think about that though. Are you lead generating right now? Are you talking to people, or is it something that we're doing like once and then it's like, oh, okay, I'll get to it again next week. And then, next week comes and we don't do it. Or we do it consistently for a week or two and we pick up clients and then we get really busy with the clients, so we neglect the lead generation. What does your calendar look like? Is lead generation blocked into your calendar? And then are we doing it? Lead generation too doesn't have to be picking up phones. I mean, a lot of that is very important. But right now, if your database isn't in order, spend that time getting your database in order. Pick up the phone and call people in your database. Hey, just checking in. It's been a while. Just wanted to see how everything's going with the house that you bought 2 years ago from me. Apologize for not keeping in touch. How's everything going? How's the family? How's the kids? How's work? Right? Very easy phone calls that we tend to overcomplicate. But be thinking about that. And am I time blocking my lead generation? What does my calendar look like? If you pull up your calendar right now, is it full of white space, or is it blocked and dialed in on what you need to get done today and what you need to get done this week and next week? And does that look consistent week after week after week? Because what I would tell you is, the more consistent you get with your business, the more consistent money you will make. And what I mean by that is that you should know next Friday at 8 a.m. you're lead generating. It should be in your calendar already. Lead generate first thing in the morning, in my opinion, is the most important thing. It's the most important thing in your business, and do it first thing in the morning, because it's also the easiest thing to push to the side and say, well, I'll get to it again. I'll get to it later. I'll get to it next week. I'll double up on it next week. So block that in. Tony DeCello, he's a speaker trainer guy from Keller Williams, really well-known guy there, great guy. Years ago, 10, 15 years ago, I remember him saying the most successful people I know are the most boring people I know. And what he meant by that was they have the most boring schedules. They have the most, what he meant by boring is that they have the most consistent schedules. Every day, their schedule looks the exact same throughout the week. Their business calendar looks very consistent. They're lead generating at the same times. They have appointment blocks. They're doing follow-up calls at the same time every day. Their schedule is very consistent because we know with this business, it can force us to be all over the place, right? Somebody sends you a text right now and says, hey, I love this house. I want to go see it. We got to figure out how to get them in to see that house as quickly as possible, because we know for a lot of us and a lot of the markets we're in a seller's market where homes are selling quickly. With that said, the more consistent we can get with our calendar, the better. So I know right now, if I'm doing this training and a client texted me and said, hey, I want to go see this house right now. Well, I know this is on my calendar. And I'd say, well, I've got an appointment at 9:30. I can meet you at 11, whatever the case may be. But get your lead generation scheduled in your calendar and treat it like an appointment. Very, very important. So any questions on that, drop it in or raise your hand or let us know, and we'll get you on stage here to ask the question. Now, here's step 2, conversations. If you're committed to doing lead generation consistently, and I'm going to give you my own personal experience, I got very good at consistently lead generating. And what it was I had a big enough why or purpose for wanting to lead generate every day, and it was to make money. I was broke. I was debt collectors calling me all the time, tons of student loans, 100+ grand in student loans, tons of credit card debt from college. So I got really good at being consistent with my lead generation, but here was the thing, my conversations were not great. My conversations were not great, meaning my scripting wasn't great. I was doing the activities, but I wasn't seeing the results yet because I wasn't good at having the actual conversation. So what I need to look at, one, is how many conversations am I having daily with prospective clients? So how many conversations am I having? Like if I lead generate for 3 hours today and I only talk to 4 people, I need to get a different strategy. I should be talking to at least 10 people an hour, at least. So if I'm not having 10 real estate related and not just like a hang up, like, hey, this is Michael calling you. I saw you registered on my website looking for a website, and they say click, like not a conversation, right? Actual conversations, about 10 an hour is what I found in my experience to be a pretty good number. 10 legitimate real estate related conversations an hour. So how many conversations am I having today? And if the answer is not many, that's and your business is slow right now, that's probably why, right? Or if the answer right now is not many, but it was like earlier this year, you're cranking out calls, talking to tons of people, and now you're super busy and you got lots of stuff going on, but you're neglecting the lead gen. Chances are at some point in the near future, once you get all of that business closed, your business is going to be slow again and you're going to have to start over. So again, we need to go back to time blocking and put this in our calendar. But how many conversations am I having today? And am I practicing the conversations that I'm having? Or am I just winging it? Am I just winging it and just hoping that, hopefully the call goes well? Or, do I have the right scripts? Go to networkglobalagents.com, download our script book. There's hundreds of scripts in there to start practicing. They do work. All right. So am I committed to getting better on my scripting? What I would tell you is when I started practicing scripts, I had a script practice partner out of Colorado. We would jump on every morning and just quickly script for about 10 or 15 minutes. It started to work really well. I started to get really good at the conversations. I started to push a little bit harder on the phone. I started asking better questions. I started being able to then internalize my scripting so I could actively listen to the conversation. When somebody was speaking back, I wasn't thinking about what am I going to say next, right? And that's what happens for a lot of us when we're not skilled on having these conversations. We're thinking about what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? And we're not listening to what they're actually saying. Question, do you consider texting conversations? I do. Yes, absolutely. I think, Roberta, any two-way conversation, whether it's through social media, Facebook Messenger, something online, a chat window thing or whatever. I think texting, two-way conversations, 100%, I consider that lead generation. Does not need to be all voice-to-voice phone conversations. I'm just using this as an example. It's something I did that worked really well for me. But yeah, 100%. Texting is considered contacts, and those are also be considered conversations. Do I get into rapport? Am I asking good questions? Right. So again, a lot of this ties into how willing am I to go get really good at my profession? Because when I started to get really good at this, all of the uhs and the ums and the uncertainty it went away. Prior to that, I was pretty young when I got into this business. I was 23. People would be like, how long have you been doing this? How long? Because I looked young. Now I got the gray hair. I'm established, right? But I looked young, and it wasn't necessarily that I looked young for the reason they were asking me how long have I been doing this. It's because I didn't know what I was doing, and it showed through. Yeah, let me check on that for you. Wasn't prepared for appointments, things of that nature. When I started to get really dialed in, and I started to have really good conversations, and I was really good at my scripting, and I knew how to overcome objections, all of that, how long have you been doing this, went away. So think about that. If people are asking you how long you've been doing this, it might not just be your age. It might be because you don't really sound like you know what you're doing. Scripting can solve a lot of those problems. So the conversations. Now, the appointment. We know we have to go on appointments in order to have a good business. Do I have a listing or buyer presentation prepared? Or is it something that I'm just winging when I go on it? I'm just going to get into rapport. That's what I did early on in my career. Just get into rapport with them. Be nice. I didn't have a presentation. I wasn't showing any value. I was just being friendly. Walk around the house. They'd be like, here's the pantry. Here's the kitchen. I'd be like, get into rapport, right? That's what I did, which is important. You have to build rapport, but that was my only value. And then when I would leave there and they'd say, okay, we'll let you know. And I'd say, yeah, okay, thanks. And then they'd hire somebody else. I would call and ask out of curiosity. I'm looking to get better. Why did you decide to hire so-and-so? And they'd say, well, they said they were going to do this, 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 and this. We really liked you, but we felt like they had a plan in place to get our house sold. So we have to bring value to our presentation. Now, if I don't have a listing presentation, go to networkglobalagents.com. There's one on there. You can start practicing that one and using it and add to it. But do I practice that as well? When I was running my sales team, we used to make our team members practice the presentation weekly, and they had to test out in front of all the team. It was uncomfortable. A lot of people did terrible on it because we're not naturally, just like we're not all just gifted where this stuff just comes super easy to us. We have to practice it. And so, but part of that was putting people into a pressure situation where they could fail in a safe place where it didn't matter as much. Like I would much rather fail practicing than go on the presentation and bomb. Who's ever been on a listing presentation and it just went horrible? All right, we've all been there, right? Every presentation is a little bit different. You might walk into a house and there's dogs jumping all over you and like it's just super weird, or you do the presentation in the garage or something. Stuff like that happens, right? So we have to practice this stuff so that we're not thrown off when we're on there. But I'm sure everybody on this call has been in a scenario where the presentation didn't go so well. And most of the time too, it's probably because we weren't prepared, right? So we have to practice. If we're not practicing our listing presentations and our buyer consultations, I highly recommend you do it. And do I ask good questions on the appointment? Am I asking questions? Am I on there talking the whole time about myself and, hey, I'm number one agent and I sell this many houses and look how great I am? Or am I asking good questions? I used to beat out an agent pretty frequently. And he was a bigger agent, and this is before I had the numbers to back up. But he would go on the presentation with all of his accolades. Look how great I am! I'm number 18 in the MLS. I'm this, that, things of that nature. And I would go in and ask really good questions, figure out what was important to them about the process of selling their home, and I would solve those problems. And they would tend to hire me a lot more than him. I used to go on a lot of expireds. But that's something to keep in mind too. Like we don't need to go there and oversell ourselves and talk about us and how great we are. We need to go in there and show them what we're going to do to get their home sold quickly and for the most money. So do I ask good questions to uncover what their pain points are in the process? All right, do I listen more than I speak? Am I asking good questions and then listening to their response? Do I build rapport and do I show value? I want you to think about this right now. On your listing presentation, where is your value? If you think about it, some of the top things people want, one, they want their house sold, of course, right? They also want to make sure that there is clear communication, that you're reaching out, responding to them. Also, they want to know that you're proactively looking for buyers for them as well. All right, so are we solving some of these things? Go on the NAR and go type in like NAR and look at what are the most common things sellers want or expect from their realtor. and go look at that and then say, okay, am I addressing these concerns in my listing presentation? If not, we need to build our listing presentation around that to be able to address it. We're also going to do here in a couple of weeks, we're going to do a what to do after you set the appointment and how to kind of like set it up for like what steps to take to prepare for that appointment, and also what to send the client ahead of time so they have information to review about you, your company, things of that nature prior to going on the appointment. But am I showing value? All right, am I going on the appointment just saying how great I am, or am I actually showing value and how I can help them accomplish their goal of selling their home? So that's it for the appointment there. Again, if you have questions, let me know. Close. Do I know how to close? Am I doing a great presentation and then I'm leaving there saying, thanks, let me know? All right, that happens a lot. I used to do that all the time. Okay, let me know. Hope you hire me. All right, so am I asking good questions? All right, am I actually closing on the appointment? Here's my goal. Here's my mindset that shifted, not when I was new, but as I started to get seasoned and learn what was going on. My mindset was that if I walk out of this house without a signed listing agreement, they are not hiring me. And that's what I used to teach my team members too. If we leave the listing, they are not hiring us without a signed agreement. They're not going to hire us. Now, would we leave the agreement or the listing sometimes? It does happen where some people are like, absolutely not. There's no way I'm making a decision today. And we would leave, and would they hire us later? For sure. But my mindset was I'm going to do everything I can on this appointment to get them to sign me without pushing too hard or without like, offending them or something like that, or putting too much pressure on them, right? Again, it's a learned set of scripting. So I would say stuff like this. Have you seen enough information to make a decision? Are you prepared to hire me? Right? And then they would say, no. Or sometimes they would say yes. Right? And if they say, well, no, we're not going to make a decision right now, I'd say, okay, I totally understand you're not ready to make a decision. And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not so confident and 10 being very confident, how confident are you, based on the information I've shared with you today, how confident are you in my ability to sell your home? An 8. Okay, it's a little lower than I would like. Now, what would I have to do to make that a 10? Your commission's high, right? Commission's high. Okay, great. Other than commission. So here's the thing. They just gave me an objection for why they aren't going to sign with me right now. And that's okay. Now I want to isolate that objection, right? Okay, other than commission, is there anything stopping you from hiring me today? No, that's it. So if we can figure out commission, you're prepared to move forward with me? Yeah, great. Let's talk about that. So now I'm going to go address my commission, utilize my commission script, so on and so forth, and get them to close. But see, a lot of agents won't ask that. You'll do what I used to do back in the day too. Like when I was new to the business, I'd just say, okay, let me know. Right? Like, was that pushing them at all? No, I'm just asking questions and allowing them to respond to me. All right. So I love the 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you in my ability to sell your home? 7. Oh, wow. It's a lot lower than I would like. What would I have to do to make it a 10? Right? And then isolate the objection. If they say, well, you'd have to do commission, I don't want to go handle the commission objection. And then they say, well, we also have 5 other agents we're interviewing as well. All right. So I want to isolate. Is there anything else other than commission stopping you from hiring me today? No, that's it. Great. Now let's go handle that. A couple of things. My hesitation is getting the signed listing agreement is because list price is TBD. Yeah. What I would say there too, Amanda, on that, I get that. That's why I feel like we have to be experts in the neighborhood. So we have to go in there with the price already set, because I have a cousin that was in the business a while back when I got in. He no longer is, but he would go with a 2-point pricing strategy where he would say, okay, he'd go on the appointment first, preview the house, then try to come back the second time to give a price. And what would happen is the agents that did that, I would usually go in the first time and I would give them a price right then and there, and I would take the listing, and then they'd cancel on that person. So one of the things I used to do that helped me with pricing is I would go preview active properties in the neighborhood. So I was making sure that any active property in the neighborhood on that appointment. Now I understand in a lot of markets, there's not a ton of actives now, but there are still some. So if the house is active, I would schedule an appointment to go preview it. And I would start looking at that house, and it does 2 things. One, when you preview actives, you start to get an idea of what homes are selling for, the quality of the homes, things like that. And 2, when you're going through your pricing, what you can do then is say, okay, to your seller now, you can say, okay, the house down the street at 123 Main Street, I've been in that house. It's got a 4-bedroom. It does have a finished lower level, which yours does not. It is a walkout, which yours is not. you can start speaking it more intelligently about the homes in the area, and it's planting seeds in the seller's mind that, oh wow, this person really knows my subdivision. They know what's going on. They've been in these houses. They know all of this. So something I would recommend is learning and studying the market really, really well ahead of time and previewing your active competition. Also, if you go on networkglobalagents.com, we have that 4-point pricing system we use. It tends to work really well. We're pulling the AVM from the tax record, the estimated value there, from RPR, the estimated value there. Zillow, we are pulling Zillow, the Zestimate, not because it's super accurate, but because we add some validity to it because the general public does look at it. And then also, of course, the most important is price per square foot for the neighborhood. Blend all 4 of those together, it gives us an average of what the price is. In my experience, typically homes would sell between 1% and 2% plus or minus that price, either 1 or 2% higher than what I listed it at, whatever that price was, or 1 to 2% lower. So I would say push for it, Amanda. Like, go into it with a price in mind, especially too, like on your pre-listing, when you talk to them, ask questions. You know, how would you rate the quality of your home? How well does it show? Have you done any significant updates since you've owned it in the last 7 years? Like things like that, we can start to get an idea on price. So that's where I'm at with the close, though. Service now too. Do I provide great service to my clients? Here's the thing I always say. Throughout a real estate transaction, they say there's 186 tasks in the real estate transaction. All right, there is a lot of moving parts in a real estate transaction. Now, what I always identify for myself, what I always identified as great service is if the client never has to call me to ask a question. If they never have to call me to ask a question, that's how I gauge that I'm giving great service. And what I mean by that is if I'm doing a good job of explaining the next steps in the process to my client, to where they never have to call me and say, hey, what do we have to do inspections? What's going on? What inspections do we need to do? If I'm saying, okay, fantastic, we are under contract now. Let's say it's a buyer. We're under contract now. Congratulations. Here are the next steps. We have a 10-day window to get all of the inspections ordered. Now, here's a list of the inspections we can do. Things like a home inspection, termite, radon, lateral, blah, 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 right? Here's all the things. Here are some home inspectors I recommend if you'd like to use, or of course, if you have someone in mind, you're more than welcome to use them as well. But I'm going to explain the next steps. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our inspections, and then we're going to be able to ask the seller to make any repairs. Now, inspectors are going to find a lot of things on the home, and we're not really looking for the small things like a nail pop in the drywall or things of that nature. We're looking for more big ticket items. But again, I'm explaining next steps in the process. Now, we get through inspections, right? We're at the inspection. We talk to the inspector. Here's our next step. We're going to look at this report and put together what we want to ask the seller to fix. We're going to submit that. Once we submit that, a second window of 10 days opens up where we are going to potentially negotiate, and we'll have to come to some form of resolution within those 10 days. My point is, are we explaining the next step? Or let's say you have an admin. I had an admin for many years. I would say, explain the next step. Here's what's going to happen next. My admin, so-and-so, is going to be reaching out. They're going to be setting up the inspections for you, things of that nature. But are we providing service and letting people know what the next step in the process is? Or are they calling us and saying, hey, what are we doing next? Hey, when's appraisal? When do I have to turn my earnest money in? Who do I turn my earnest money into? All right, but think about this. Do you have a checklist in place? Because we know that most transactions, everything's the same. And what I mean by that is once we go into contract, they have a certain number of days to get their earnest money turned in. There's a certain number of days to get their price, or excuse me, a certain number of days to get their inspections done. There's a certain number of days for loan commitment, which is very important. All right, do we have a checklist in place? And what I tell you is if you don't have checklist, we need to get checklists set up. Now, I'm a huge fan of checklist, and here's why. Because if you think about it, a checklist, if you have a checklist, it removes a lot of air for mistakes. And so if you have a checklist for a buyer under contract, you have a checklist for a seller under contract, you have a checklist for when you take a listing and what steps need to happen there. Put these checklists in place. I'll look to and see if I can pull some of my old ones as well, and we'll share them with you guys. But I have checklists today. When we onboard new agents, we have checklists in place that happen, right? What happens is, if you think about it, John Maxwell, he says, systems make the ordinary extraordinary. And a checklist, in a lot of ways, is a system. It's going to eliminate a lot of the potential for error. A lot of you probably know this. I'm an aviation major. I was a pilot, have all my pilot ratings in college. So I used to fly airplanes all the time. And there are checklists for everything. There's a checklist before you get in the airplane. There's a pre-flight checklist. I'm walking around, I'm checking the prop, I'm sumping the fuel tanks, I'm checking the ailerons, the elevators, and making sure everything's working. All right, there's a checklist before I start the airplane. There's a checklist before I taxi. There's a checklist before I take off. There's a checklist after I take off. There's a checklist before I land. And what happens is when you follow your checklist, it's very easy to not make mistakes. But what happens is this is what happens. People are like, oh, this happened to a friend of mine. He had, I don't know, 600 hours or 400 hours or something like that, and of flight time. And he was like, he thought he knew what he was doing. All right, he didn't follow the checklist. He forgot to put the landing gear down on a Duchess twin-engine plane, and he crashed the plane. He belly landed it, destroyed the props, screwed the plane up. It was $400,000 airplane that he totally destroyed. The reason for that was because he didn't follow his checklist. He's like, I know what I'm doing. I've done this enough. And he made a really costly mistake by not flipping a single switch to put the landing gear down. That's what happens when we don't follow checklists. So my point here is a system. Build systems to provide fantastic service. Right? Checklists are systems. When you follow checklist, it leaves a lot of room to not make errors. Also, in the event that you hire an admin at some point, or maybe you have an admin now, make them put the checklist together. All right, you don't have to do it. But if you're going to hire an admin at some point, you can say, okay, here's the checklist I follow. And a good admin is going to say, these are great. We're doing this. I feel like after time, they're going to say, you know what, if we tweak this, or we make some improvements here, I feel like we could add this in, or they're going to help you refine those and make them even better. So be thinking about that. If you don't have a checklist and you're just kind of winging it, let's look through that. Okay, pending. Once they're under contract, am I trained on how to keep my clients excited during the process? Right? Do I have a pending process? Again, it ties into checklist again. Am I keeping my clients updated on what to expect next? What I find the biggest but like the biggest like gap is like between loan commitment and closing, especially if it's like a 2-week period. Are we keeping in touch with our client? We had loan commitment, great. We still have 2 weeks or maybe in 3 weeks to close. And then they're kind of like, I haven't heard from my realtor in 10 days or 12 days. And they call you, hey, just checking in. Is everything okay? Do we have a process in place to fill those gaps as well? All right. Big thing too with it just goes back to communication. I used to list a lot of expired properties, and 97% of the time I would say when I would ask, how was your experience with your last realtor when you were on the market? Most of the time there was no communication. Well, yeah, we would call them. We wouldn't hear back from them. We would have to call them and ask them for price adjustments. It would take 3 days to get a response. We haven't heard from them since they listed the property. That's real stuff that happened. So I built in my communication guarantee, and basically what that was is my commitment to you is that you're going to hear from me every single week with an update. And so what were my updates? Well, if it was a seller, I would call, and even if we didn't have any showings, I would call them and say, look, we hadn't had any showings this week. We've had X amount of hits online through the hit counters and Maris. You can look at stuff on realtor.com and Zillow and all that. We've had a lot of viewings online and no one's coming to see it. Maybe that's time for a price adjustment conversation. Same thing with buyers on the pendings. I would at least touch base with my clients every week. Hey, just want to give you an update. We had a loan commitment, as you know, last week. Just want to let you know everything's still moving forward. I talked to title. Things are continuing to move forward. We're set to close in a week and a half at 10 a.m., blah, 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 right? So make sure, again, every week, that's something I can't stress enough, update your clients every week. Even sometimes no update is an update. Let's say you had 4 showings on a house and no one's giving you feedback. Call your client. Let them know. Hey, just want to let you know, we've had those 4 showings. I'm still trying to get hold of all 4 of them. I have calls into them, emails into them, texting them. No one's responding yet, but I'm staying on it. I'm going to continue to reach out to get feedback, and I'll update you as soon as I do. Again, that's an update. Sometimes no update is an update. The other thing I used to like to do is I'd like to update my clients later in the week because then they wouldn't call me on the weekend. So if I call my clients every Friday, which is what I usually did, they wouldn't bug me on the weekend. Here's what happens. You start selling 8, 10, 11, 12 homes a month. Like, you want to keep your weekends as free as possible without having tons of phone calls. So the more you can update them and be proactive and not by not being proactive, having them call you kind of control your schedule a little bit more. So be thinking about that. Am I keeping my clients updated on what to expect next? Also, closing. Do my clients have a successful closing experience? Do you go to closing? I know some agents that don't go to closing. I totally disagree with it. I think if you don't go to closing, even though we don't do anything at the closing, it's the closure to the process. It's the final piece. It's like the dessert at a great meal, right? You go to a great restaurant. If the dessert sucks, that's kind of all you remember. If you don't show up for closing because you're too busy, what kind of message does that send? It's also a great time to ask for referrals as well. So, am I setting my clients up to have a successful closing experience? What does that mean? Am I prepping them for where closing is taking place? What time is closing? What documents they need to bring? Do they need to bring a cashier's check, or are they wiring the money? Am I letting them know all of those steps ahead of time, or am I just relying on the title company to do it? Here's the thing: inspectors, lenders, title companies, they're all an extension of our business, but it's also, in my opinion, our responsibility to not make sure just everything falls on their shoulders. I want to stay involved with that process. Okay, great, we're closing at 10:30 on the 31st. I'm not going to rely on the title company to let them know that. I'm going to make sure I let my client know that. I'm going to make sure I'm present at the closing. All right, whether you bring a client gift or not, totally up to you. I used to do a gift card and I stopped doing it. So I didn't see a ton of value in the client gifts personally, but I'm not saying it's not something that's important. If it's something you do and it's working, continue to do it. What I found was giving great service. I do client events and things like that throughout the year. So I'd save my money to do bigger events like that. But I would ask for referrals too. I would ask for referrals frequently throughout the process, not just waiting until the closing. So something you can do even at the buyer consultation or the listing appointment when they're signing docs with you. You can say, look, my goal and objective is to give the best service possible to you. And one of the ways I'm going to know that I did a great job for you is that throughout this process, chances are you're going to speak to a couple of people that are also thinking about buying and selling. And if you wouldn't mind referring me, or at least passing my information along, I would really appreciate it. And that's one of the ways I know I'm giving you great service, is because you feel necessary to make sure you let other people know about the service I provide. And so if we don't have anyone if you don't have a chance to send me any referrals by the closing process, I just want to touch base with you and make sure I did everything I could to give you great service. All right. And that puts a little onus on people too. They're like, well, yeah, no, of course, I'd be happy to refer you. I promise you have little conversations like that, you're going to have people refer you more. And then you're going to ask them at closing too. Rather than saying, hey, if you know anybody, let me know, ask them, hey, I really enjoyed working with you. And I like working with people like you. You guys were great. Out of curiosity, do you know anyone else right now looking to buy or sell or invest in real estate that I might be able to call? All right. No, nobody we could think about. Totally understand. Would you mind passing my information along if you hear of anybody at some point in the future? Sure. Or sometimes you're gonna be like, yeah, actually my aunt, my uncle. I promise you your business will go up if you ask. You don't have to be pushy, but just ask. Then at closing, what am I doing with my client? Am I never going to talk to them again? Or one thing I always recommend is go into KV Core Bold Trail, set them up on a market update. If you go into the Agent Quick Start Guide on networkglobalagents.com, there's two things I highly recommend. Get them on a market update. So once a month, they get sent a market update for their zip code. The second thing is go in and draw a little shape around their subdivision. That way, anytime a property comes available, it gets sent to them from you. So it's positioning you as their neighborhood expert, keeping them up to date with what's selling and going on in their neighborhood. So go watch those two videos. They're just a couple minutes long each. And I would start setting up all of your clients there. All right, last step, repeat referral. Does my level of client service allow me to receive repeat and referral business? Am I consistently generating business from my database, or am I constantly chasing new business from strangers? So you've all heard me say this, many of you anyway. I used to use the excuse that I don't want to bother my clients. Oh, they just closed, they just moved. I don't want to call them. I don't want to bother them, right? And so I would never do anything to reach out to them. So I would build a great relationship. I would talk to these people every day for a couple of months until we got to closing. I would go to closing, they'd be happy, I'd get paid, and I'd never speak to them again. So how did they feel? I was justifying it by saying I don't want to bother them, but they felt like they were just a transaction to me. Oh, he doesn't care about us. He got paid and he never talked to us again. So when I changed my frame of thought around that, and I started saying, okay, I just established this great relationship with these people, I owe it to them and myself to continue to strengthen that relationship. So what I recommend is call them 4 times a year. Touch base, say hello. How are things? How are things working out? All right, 4 times a year. Set them up on the market plan, the market update. set them up on that neighborhood search that we have a video on. And if you do those things, that's probably enough, honestly, to keep generating more business from your database. Of course, there's way more you can do. Client events, and you can do, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Pop buys, things like that. It all works, right? But I would say if we're not doing the bare minimum, then I wouldn't worry about doing the other stuff. And I'll give you an example. Before I was doing the bare minimum of just keeping in touch with my clients, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a client event. And I spent a few $1,000s on this, invited like 600 of my past clients, and I think like 30 showed up. All right. Now, 30 showed up because I hadn't kept in touch with any of them. My time and money would have been better used if I just picked up the phone and started calling all of them. Hey, I know it's been a few years since we talked. Just wanted to reach out, say hello. How's everything going? If I started to build those relationships and then added on with my client event, I probably would have had a much better turnout. All right, so be thinking about that. If we're not doing the bare minimum to stay in touch, it's probably not a good time to go start spending money on client events, right? Like I know agents that do client events, and they do them very, very well. And it's because they do a good job of staying in touch with their database. So my point here is, once I started doing a better job of staying in touch with my database, my client events, the attendance started to go up. So just keep that in mind, something I think is very important. But the biggest thing is, does my level of client service allow me to receive repeat and referral business? If the answer is no, we have a big hole in our process that we need to fill. All right, so I want you to look at this real quick. Let's look at the sales cycle. And if I look at this and I'm being honest, and I had to score each one of these from 1 to 10, how would I do? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not so good and 10 being great, how do I do on making calls consistently? Not just when I feel like it, but consistently. 1 to 10, how do I do on conversations? 1 to 10 on the appointment, 1 to 10 on the close, service, pending, closing, repeat, referral. Just write these out in a circle and put a number, and then just draw a line and see, like, from each to each, and see where are the holes at in my business. I used to do this all the time. I still do it today. I look at where are the holes in my business and where do I need improvement. And I'll give you an example. Early on, I got really good at making phone calls. I would rate myself an 8, 9, 10 at that. I was doing great consistently every day. Phone calls, conversations, I was like a 2. Appointments, I was a 1. Close, I was a 0. Right. So I had to look at it and say, okay, I'm doing great, consistent at making phone calls. Now I need to get better at my conversations. I need some scripting. I better go get a script practice partner and start doing this. Then my conversations got better. Then my appointments were still weak. I had to improve my appointments. My point here is, I look at every step of this process and see, where are my weaknesses? Where do I need to improve? And then I go put focus on that and improve it. Okay, my service is terrible right now. I need to improve that. Well, do I have some checklist in place? Do I have a process in place? Do my systems look the same? Go back to the John Maxwell quote: systems make the ordinary extraordinary. A checklist is a system. It's a very easy system. But are we putting that in place to make sure that we're not missing steps, we're not forgetting to do things? And the more we do that, I'd have my admin do that all the time. Again, we do it today. We have checklists that get checked off. Does that mean errors don't happen? No. Mistakes still get made. But does it limit the amount of mistakes? 100%. It does. Mistakes will still happen. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have errors. But when we get more consistent with our systems and we start utilizing, because that's step 2, is you have to get your people to actually use the systems. If you have staff and so forth, you have to get them to use them. So then you have to, what they call, inspect what you expect. This is what I expect. I expect my staff to use these systems. I need to make sure that I'm checking in frequently to make sure they're using them. So when we get this process in place, though, again, it's a never-ending cycle, right? Because after I get my repeat referral, I continue to make calls to my past clients to stay in touch, and it just keeps continuing to happen. So that's all we've got for today. I hope that was helpful. Do we have any questions? If we have questions, drop them in. Looking at here, what we got online here. Cool. Yeah, if you have questions, drop them in. Again, if you want to jump on here with me and talk, more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But I hope this was helpful. Take screenshots of this. Again, I would look at it and see, where are you at with this process, right? Where are you strong? Where are you a little bit weaker? Where do you need improvement? And again, hope it was helpful. Appreciate you all being on. I think we have Agent Mastermind tomorrow, Leo, if that's correct. Agent Mastermind, I believe, tomorrow at 9:30. So if you want to jump on that one as well, we do that every other week. Appreciate you all being on, though. Really appreciate it. Tim, thank you. Shantae, thank you. Leo just posted the link there for the Agent Mastermind too. feel free to grab that and sign up. But again, thanks everybody. I really appreciate you being on. I got a thing here. You mentioned the 186 touch points in the transaction. Do you have a sheet to reference though? Yes, I will find that. I can obviously can't remember the whole 186. But here's what I will tell you. As a real estate agent, the 186 task, there's like 6 that we should focus on. We should outsource the rest. So the 6, and I can never remember all 6, but bear with me. It's something to the effect of like script practice, lead generation, contract negotiation, going on appointments, servicing clients, maybe one more. Everything else we can look to outsource to somebody else. And what I mean by that is if I don't have a, like for me, I've always had not always, but pretty early on in my career, I hired an admin. I don't recommend it for everybody because it's a big cost. And you've got to make sure you're increasing income quickly to cover that cost. But it can be. I look at staff or hiring people as an investment, not an expense. Because if you hire the right people, then your business can really take off. But we need to look at this and say, okay, could I hire a contract to close person for $300 or $400 transaction, and they could take a lot of that off my plate, and then I can focus on going and generating more business. So now that becomes, instead of a fixed expense, it becomes more of a cost of sales. So if I close 3 deals, I know it's going to cost me $1,200 to close those 3 transactions, but now it's allowed me to go from 3 deals to maybe 4 deals a month or 5 deals a month. And so I'll get you a list of the 186 points. I'll post that in the Facebook group. But yeah, there's a lot that goes on in this process and in this transaction. There's a lot of room to make mistakes in a transaction. The biggest ones being like missing loan commitment. We have a loan commitment date and we just rely on the lender to hit that. I find that most lenders don't understand what our loan commitment date is. They don't understand the importance of what the loan commitment date is. They don't understand that if they miss the loan commitment and now our buyer becomes a cash buyer. All right. So again, if a lender misses loan commitment, did the lender miss loan commitment or did we miss loan commitment? Ultimately, it's our responsibility. It's our contract. It's our client. We need to make sure we're staying on the lender to ensure they're giving us full loan commitment, not like conditional loan commitment on a bunch of other stuff. No, if that happens, then we need to get an amendment, push loan commitment. But there are a lot of things that happen that aren't necessarily what I would call our job or our responsibility, because title's handling it or lender or the home inspector. But at the end of the day, it is our responsibility. We have to own every aspect of this and make sure that we're staying on top of it to provide as smooth a closing as possible. So be thinking about that. If each of your closings are really chaotic, it might be you in your process. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, because it's easier to put blame on somebody else. But when we look at it at the end of the day, this is our transaction. Are there things we could be putting in place to make sure these things run as smooth as possible? I can't control somebody else doing their job if I'm not paying them, like a lender or a title, but I can make sure I'm staying on top of them to make sure things are getting done. All right. So again, checklist, look at it. I'll find the 186 though, and I'll get that to you, Ebony. And I appreciate you being on. And that's all we got for today. We'll see you all soon. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Take care.